My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 32 years old. And 6 months ago, my father looked me in the eyes on my wedding day, raised a crystal champagne glass in front of nearly 300 guests, and calmly erased me from his life. Not because I had stolen from him. Not because I had embarrassed the family. Not because I had failed. He disowned me because I married the man I loved. His exact words still echo in my mind. From this moment forward, Claire receives nothing. No inheritance. No trust fund. No company shares. She has chosen her future, and she can live with it. The ballroom became so quiet I could hear the ice clink against the side of his glass. People avoided looking at me. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked entertained. A few quietly lifted their phones beneath the tables. Humiliation spreads quickly when wealthy people smell it. My mother stared down at her plate. She had perfected that expression years ago. The one that said she disagreed without ever risking the courage to say so. My younger brother looked uncomfortable. My cousins whispered. Several executives exchanged awkward smiles before pretending nothing had happened. Then everyone looked toward my husband. Waiting. Expecting him to beg. To apologize. To promise he would leave me so I could reclaim my father's fortune. Instead, Ethan smiled. Not arrogantly. Not defiantly. Just peacefully. He reached for my hand beneath the table, squeezed it gently, and whispered only 4 words. We'll make our own. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of the people my father had invited to witness what he believed would be the biggest mistake of my life. Because he wanted tears. He wanted regret. He wanted me to run back to him before dessert was served. Instead, I thanked every guest who congratulated us. I danced with my husband. I cut the cake. And I left the ballroom with nothing except the wedding dress I was wearing and the man beside me. Looking back now, that was the richest I'd ever been. Growing up in the Whitmore family felt less like being someone's daughter and more like being an employee who never got to clock out. My father built Whitmore Dynamics from a tiny software company into one of the biggest cybersecurity firms in the country. Magazines called him visionary. Business schools studied him. Television hosts admired him. Employees feared him. Investors worshipped him. At home, he expected perfection. Breakfast conversations sounded like board meetings. Dinner sounded like performance reviews. Every report card became a quarterly earnings statement. Every accomplishment immediately led to another expectation. When I graduated first in my engineering class, he shook my hand instead of hugging me. Good, he said. Now don't waste it. That was his version of congratulations. I spent years convincing myself that if I achieved enough, worked hard enough, won enough, he would finally look at me the way fathers in movies looked at their daughters. With pride. Instead, he looked at me like another asset on a balance sheet. Useful. Replaceable. Expected to appreciate in value. Then I met Ethan. Not at a charity gala. Not through business connections. Not because our families moved in the same circles. I met him because my car broke down on the side of a highway during a thunderstorm. My phone had no signal. Rain poured so heavily I could barely see the road. Nearly 40 minutes passed before an old pickup truck stopped behind me. A tall man climbed out carrying a toolbox. His jeans were stained with engine oil. His boots were covered in mud. His dark hair was soaked from the rain. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "My car isn't." He laughed. "Let's fix that first." He spent almost an hour replacing a damaged belt with one he happened to have in his truck. When I asked how much I owed him, he shrugged. "Buy someone else dinner someday." That was it. No business card. No flirting. No attempt to impress me. Just kindness. 3 days later, I tracked him down to return the favor. He owned a small repair shop outside the city. Nothing fancy. 3 service bays. A faded sign. Coffee that tasted terrible. The happiest employees I'd ever met. Everyone laughed there. Customers knew the mechanics by name. Children ran through the waiting room without anyone complaining. It felt strangely unfamiliar. People actually enjoyed being there. When Ethan saw me working carrying coffee and pastries, he looked genuinely surprised. "I thought you'd forget about me." "I don't forget people who help me." He smiled. "That's rare." Neither of us knew then how much that sentence would eventually mean. Weeks turned into months. Months became a year. We built a life far away from penthouses and shareholder meetings. He never cared who my father was. In fact, the first time I mentioned Whitmore Dynamics, he simply nodded. "I've heard the name." Then he changed the subject. No questions about money. No curiosity about inheritances. No interest in my last name. Only me. For the first time in my life. Someone loved Claire. Not Whitmore. Not the CEO's daughter. Just Claire. When I finally told my parents I was engaged, my mother cried. Not happy tears. Fear. She knew exactly how my father would react. He listened quietly. Finished his coffee. Folded the newspaper. Then looked directly at me. "What does he own?" I blinked. "What?" "The man you're marrying." "What does he own?" "A repair shop." "No." He shook his head. I asked what he owns. "The repair shop." He laughed. Not loudly. Just enough to make everyone else at the table uncomfortable. I spent 40 years building this family into something respected. And you're throwing it away for a mechanic. He isn't just a mechanic. No. No. Then what is he? I smiled. A good man. My father leaned back in his chair. A good man doesn't build empires. He builds families. He stood. Conversation over. I won't pay for this wedding. I didn't ask you to. You won't inherit this company. I never asked for it. You'll regret this. I remember standing there, looking at the man I'd spent my entire childhood trying to impress. Suddenly realizing nothing I ever did would have changed his mind. Because his disappointment had never been about Ethan. It had always been about control. And I was slipping beyond it. The wedding arrived 3 months later. My father attended. So did every important executive in his company. Politicians. investors, news anchors, people who had never met me, people who came only because Richard Whitmore had invited them. By the end of the evening, every one of them would remember my wedding. Just not for the reason I'd hoped. The ceremony itself was beautiful. The sun was beginning to set behind the vineyards, painting the sky with shades of gold and orange. A warm breeze drifted across the garden, carrying the scent of fresh roses and lavender. For 30 minutes, nothing else existed except Ethan and me. When the officiant asked if I accepted him as my husband, I answered before he finished the sentence. I do. Ethan smiled with tears in his eyes. I do. Everyone applauded. For one brief moment, I believed the worst was behind us. I couldn't have been more wrong. The reception was held inside the Grand Kensington Ballroom, one of the most luxurious hotels in the city. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead while a live orchestra played softly in the background. Every table was decorated with white orchids and silver candles. It looked like something out of a magazine. My father had insisted on paying for the venue despite refusing to support the marriage. At the time, I thought it was his way of making peace. Instead, it was the stage he had chosen for my public humiliation. Dinner had just been served when he slowly stood from his seat. The room naturally fell silent. Richard Whitmore rarely needed to ask for attention. His reputation demanded it. Someone handed him a microphone. He smiled the same confident smile that had convinced investors to trust him with billions of dollars. I'd like to make a toast. Polite applause followed. He looked directly at me. I've always believed family is built on values. The guests nodded. My daughter has decided those values no longer matter. The smile never left his face. She has chosen emotion over responsibility. Someone laughed nervously. I spent 4 decades building the Whitmore legacy. His eyes shifted toward Ethan. And today she has chosen to leave it behind. He paused just long enough for everyone to absorb his words. Effective immediately. He reached into his jacket and unfolded a single sheet of paper. Claire Whitmore will receive no inheritance. A gasp spread across the ballroom. No trust fund. Another pause. No ownership in Whitmore Dynamics. Several executives exchanged surprised looks. My lawyers have already prepared the necessary documents. I heard someone whisper my name. Others stared openly. One woman covered her mouth. It wasn't enough for him to disapprove. He wanted witnesses. He wanted everyone in that ballroom to understand exactly how expensive my decision would become. Then he delivered the sentence that hurt more than anything else. If she wishes to live like ordinary people. He slowly looked toward Ethan. She is welcome to discover what ordinary life costs. Silence. No music. No laughter. Even the waiters stopped moving. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. Waiting. Wondering whether I'd beg. Whether I'd apologize. Whether I'd choose money over love. Instead, Ethan quietly stood beside me. He picked up his untouched glass of champagne, raised it toward my father, and smiled. Thank you for making her decision easier. My father frowned. You've saved her years of trying to earn something that was never freely given. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ethan reached for my hand. We'll make our own. Those 4 words confused everyone. There wasn't an ounce of anger in his voice. No pride. No challenge. Just certainty. He looked at me instead of my father. Ready to go home? Home. Not mansion. Not estate. Not inheritance. Home. I nodded. Without another word, we thanked the guests who genuinely wished us well. We ignored the whispers. Ignored the cameras. Ignored the shocked expressions. As we reached the ballroom doors, I heard my father call after me. "You'll be back." I stopped walking. He smiled confidently. When reality hits. When the bills arrive. When love isn't enough. You'll come home. For years, hearing those words would have broken me. Instead, I simply smiled. I'm going home. Then Ethan opened the door for me. We walked out together. Neither of us looked back. The next morning, reality arrived much faster than I expected. Every credit card connected to my family had been cancelled. My phone plan had been terminated. The apartment my father owned was no longer available. Even my access badge to Whitmore Dynamics headquarters had been disabled before sunrise. By noon, security politely escorted me out of the building carrying one cardboard box. 20 minutes later, Human Resources emailed me. My resignation had been accepted. I had never submitted one. My father had made sure every bridge behind me was burning. Friends I had known since childhood suddenly stopped answering calls. Dinner invitations disappeared. Group chats went silent. One woman I'd considered my closest friend finally texted. "I'm so sorry. Dad says doing business with your father is complicated enough already. I hope you understand." Understand? She had known me for 15 years. Apparently my friendship had been worth exactly one business contract. I deleted her number. Then another message arrived. Another excuse. Another apology. By sunset, almost everyone connected to my old life had disappeared. I sat quietly on the porch of the tiny rental house Ethan had found outside the city. It wasn't impressive. The paint needed work. The fence leaned slightly. The porch creaked whenever someone walked across it. But nobody could take it away because it belonged to us. Ethan carried 2 mugs of coffee outside. He handed me one before sitting beside me. "You okay?" I stared toward the empty fields across the road. "I don't know who I am anymore." He nodded. "I do." I looked at him. "You're the same woman who stopped on a highway to thank a stranger. The same woman who cries during animal rescue commercials. The same woman who tips waitresses even when the service is terrible. The same woman who spent an hour helping my apprentice study for his certification exam." He smiled gently. "Your last name never made you those things." His words settled somewhere deep inside me. For the first time since leaving the ballroom, I breathed without feeling crushed. Maybe my father had taken away everything he had given me. But he hadn't taken away everything I had become. And I was about to discover something neither of us expected. 3 days later, an email landed in my inbox from a small technology startup I'd interviewed with months before my wedding. The subject line read, "We'd still love to have you join us." I stared at the screen for several seconds. It wasn't charity. They hadn't contacted me because of my father's name. In fact, they specifically wrote that they admired the product strategy presentation I had personally delivered during the interview. For the first time in my career, someone wanted to hire me because of my own work, not because I was Richard Whitmore's daughter. I accepted the offer before lunchtime. I had no idea that accepting that single email would place me directly on a collision course with my father again. Exactly 6 months later.